So we are the Product Managers Association Los Angeles. We've been around since 2012. We've grown to 2,000 members, and we do a few things. We put on monthly meetup events. In the past, we had done in-person events at different companies around LA, from South Bay to Pasadena. We've been adopting to the virtual world, so keep an eye out for the coming months. We've had a little drop off in the last few months, not surprising, but we're going to come on strong in the second half of the year. So keep an eye out for that. We also put on a larger event. We put on a product summit at AT&T last year where 250 folks came together on a Saturday to talk product. Again, we're shifting to a virtual world, so look out for a virtual meetup that we have coming up in September. Some very exciting stuff there. And we're also coming out with a podcast. So Miles will probably be able to talk to us a little bit about that in the coming weeks. If you guys are interested in helping out, we are a 100% volunteer organization. So, we'd love to have you join us. I'd also like to say we're very excited for another collaboration with UCLA. I am a Bruin myself. David Lynn will mention that as well. But earlier this year, we put together the Hack for Hope hackathon for COVID. It was a joint venture between USC, UCLA, and PMA was able to participate. And it was terrific to see students come together to do something important. And it's humbling that 28 members of our product community were able to help out and be product mentors to those teams. So congratulations again to the winners. And thank you to everyone who participated now from both sides of the house. Very excited for tonight's event with AnderTech, and David will speak to us about that in a minute. But before we get into our program, we just want to take a few minutes to acknowledge two big things that are happening in our world right now. One, we just want to recognize the pain being felt by some of our community members, some of our Black community members, as well as some of our people of color community members who are at PMALA. We stand with you, and in the coming weeks, you'll see some of the activities we have planned, but just know that we are dedicated to help fighting inequality, especially in tech, in the weeks, years, months, and years to come. We're in it for the long haul, so please know that we are with you. Secondly, I wanted to acknowledge and address our community members who have been negatively impacted by the economic downturn due to the coronavirus pandemic. We are with you too. The heart of PMA is the community, and we are what keeps each other strong. So if you haven't been affected and can pay it forward, please try to find a way to do that. A simple way right now is if you're a hiring manager or someone at your company is looking to hire, just post a job description in the chat right now. I'm sure there's folks on this call who would be very happy to see it. And if you, short of that, if you know of a role that maybe you're not personally interested in and you can think of someone, please reach out to them. Or if you could recommend someone you worked with for a role, or if you can reach out to your network. The strength of PMA is our community, and it's really an important time for us to stick together. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to David Lynn, and we will continue with today's program.
Thanks, Ethan. So for those of you who aren't familiar with AnderTech, AnderTech is the Tech Business Association at UCLA Anderson School of Business, School of Management, actually, I think. And we're really excited to partner with PMALA because PM is actually the second most popular function being recruited for, and tech is the most popular industry. Around almost half of our graduates stay in Southern California, so we see this as a really awesome opportunity to expand the PM communities on both sides, and really expand the community across different stages of the PM pipeline. And like Ethan said, this is hopefully going to be the first/second of many partnerships to come. And so the goal of this panel is really to share some best practices and strategies for succeeding in a new PM role. And we're kind of framing that in this idea of a 90-day plan, focusing on the first 14, 30, and 90 days to really make a huge impact and to set yourself up for a successful career. It's also a way to time box things so that you're keeping yourself accountable and able to track your progress as you go. So for tonight's event, we're going to quickly do introductions for each of the panelists, and then we're going to move into 14, 30, and 90-day frameworks, what to think about in those different time frames. And then lastly, we'll open it up to audience Q&A, which is going to be handled through the Zoom Q&A function. It should be on the bottom of your screen. So the first panelist I want to introduce you to is Yanni Wang. She's a rotational associate product manager at Epson America and an Anderson graduate of 2019. She comes from a sales and marketing background pre-MBA and actually worked as a summer intern at Epson and did such a killer job that she got the return offer. She's joining the panel today to uphold that Anderson pillar of sharing success and to share her experiences with successful PM internships, as well as working in a more marketing-centric PM role. Next, Miles Montes is a senior product manager at ADP. He's a member of the PMA LA leadership team and an entrepreneur. He's a CPO and co-founder of Shop Latinx, a marketplace for Latinx brands that create and design products for Latinx consumers. A graduate of Cal Poly Pomona, Miles brings his extensive experience in technical product leadership in both large enterprises and startups to our discussion today. And then lastly, Ethan Cole, you just heard from him. He's the lead product manager at AT&T, as well as the president of PMA LA. And he's a Bruin. And as a Bruin, he actually earned his PhD in art history, studying ancient American cultures, before realizing that he wanted to switch from studying the past to shaping the future. And it was Ethan's recommendation of the first 90 days by Michael Watkins that really inspired the format of this panel. And today he's going to share some of his plan that helped him succeed in a variety of past roles. So to start things off with this conversation, it's always important to think about what that end goal is, what success actually looks like. And this is going to vary really widely depending on your specific role, your organization, your product, your personal goals. But there are still some universal themes and truths that I think are worth exploring. So why don't we start off with Miles? Can you talk a little bit to how you view success in the first 90 days as a PM?
Thanks, David. Appreciate the intro. Yeah, I think the first 90 days, especially as a new person in product or even just a new hire in general for any role, right? You automatically think like, how can I make an impact as quickly as I can? But almost, I would view it differently, right? In your first 90 days, you're really looking at establishing your understanding of the customer experience, right? What is the product? One, what is the product? Two, who are your stakeholders that you should know, whether they're on your product team or your Scrum team, right? Or your business stakeholders that you will be working with directly, whether that's the folks on the front line that are managing that function, or whether it's the executive leaders that you work with, where you're really going to channel all of your outcomes and OKRs to. And so with that, right, instead of focusing on like, how can I deliver like a product experience, right, you really should be soaking in like what is the product, for one. And when I say what is the product, it's really what's the customer experience? What's the journey of a customer from the moment that they buy your product to the moment that they onboard into your product and to the moment that they're using your product, right? If you're a product manager in a large enterprise company, you're likely in one of those three parts of that journey, right? And so it's on you, like, to hold yourself accountable to really understand how that journey is for the client. Go sit with the product manager that works on onboarding. Go sit with the product manager that works on the sales portion of the product. And if there's no PM there, go sit with a salesperson, right? Go on a client visit, and then go talk to customers, right? It's probably not pertinent now to go outside, right? But we have Zoom. Customers are more than willing to meet with you. One of the first things I did with Shop Latinx was to actually talk to customers. And these are customers that love the brand. They were excited to hear that we wanted to talk to them. So you should have that same assumption when you go into a role, that you really understand the the customer or client experience end to end. And then you make it a goal to really know who's on your product team. Go to lunch with your engineering counterpart, or go on Zoom coffee walks, as I do them now. You know, I used to go to lunch, or I used to go on coffee walks, but now they're just Zoom coffee walks, and people are more than willing to do it. So just make an effort, and then, you know, try to have one-on-ones with your boss. Not all the time is it going to come directly from your boss, right? Sometimes you kind of have to put yourself out there, and meet with some of the leaders yourself. And you'll find that when you do that, people notice, right? When you ask somebody out for lunch, there was this one business leader at ADP that I had first met with. It was literally like my first maybe 15 days there. And I had asked her out to lunch, and, you know, she talked about the prior product manager that was in my position, right? And one of the questions I asked was, you know, like, what does success look like for you in terms of my role, right? And she listed out like really 5 quick bullet points. Don't leave, which is kind of ironic, right? But 2, you know, if I'm going to teach you about the business, then I expect you to really like retain that knowledge, you know, document everything. Don't leave anything up for your mind to remember something. You're not going to remember it. You're literally in your first 90 days, right? So it's important to document. I'll pause there because I probably said a lot already. People can kind of process, but
yeah, we'll definitely dive into the details in a little bit. But I really like the idea of actually asking directly, you know, what did the previous PM, what could they have done better? That's a good way of making it less personal on you and your relationship. Ethan, can you speak a little bit to how you define success for the first 90 days?
Yeah, I mean, really, your goal the first 90 days is just to learn. And I think it's pretty well established that you're going to suck resources. You're going to be devouring resources more than you're giving back. More value is going to come into you than you're giving out for at least the first 90 days. And I believe, you know, on average, it's like the first 6 months. So really your job is to learn as soon as you can and as much as you can. And so I think we'll talk about the 90-day plan, but just having some sort of way to navigate that in an organized fashion to accelerate your learning as fast as you can. That really is success. But to what Miles mentioned, it's really also about understanding and setting expectations with your boss and with others in the organization. And, you know, the keys to that really comes in, you know, understanding what's expected to you and also establishing trust, because again, PMs, really one of our main jobs of everything is to have relationships with folks on all sides of the business. And, you know, anytime you start a new role, you start fresh. So maybe you came from someplace and you were highly respected. And if you're super lucky, maybe 1 or 2 of those folks work at the new company. But if not, you know, you got to start from ground zero and build those relationships back up. And so it's really key to focus on getting quick ways to build established trust and get those relationships working so that then you can move smoothly and solve some of the problems that Miles was talking about.
Right, absolutely. And lastly, Yanni, if you could speak to internships specifically, if there's some, because a large portion of our audience is actually probably starting their internships last week or this week. How do you see success in those 90 days when it encompasses the whole internship?
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely agree with everything that Ethan and Miles have said. And I think that it works across new PM roles as well as internship. Those are just really important things for every PM. I mean, in the end, like in my mind, probably the top 2 things for PMs ultimately is driving results for the business and creating influence, sometimes without authority over the people that you work with. So in terms of driving results for an internship, that means, like Miles mentioned, think about how you're creating impact with your internship project. That goes to like thinking deeply about what is the goal of your project? What really does your project do for the business? And what kind of impact and decisions your project will drive for the business? So try to sometimes jump out a little bit from your specific role and think more about how your work contributes to the company as a whole. Because I think eventually, like, people notice that you're thinking in the shoes of the company and you're trying to leave something behind after your internship that's going to be of value to the company, even after you've done your internship and left. So I think that does create more impact. And then the other thing is, so the creating influence without authority, like as an intern, it can become even more difficult to do that. But what I think helps, at least for me, is try to get understanding of the perspectives of the teams that you're working with. Because I think that helps me to create influence without authority, is how do they look at that project? How do they look at what you're requesting from them? How can your project benefit their work? You know, how can we, because I think there just needs to be a mutual understanding to get them aligned onto your vision as a PM and make sure that everyone is on the same boat trying to drive towards success. So yeah.
Right, absolutely. And that's a good segue into the first 14 days. So thinking about the first 2 weeks when you're trying to build those relationships with your stakeholders, you know, and with the ultimate goal of being able to influence them and get alignment. Miles, can you talk a little bit more about starting off at ADP and how you engaged with the teams there, especially switching, you know, into the function brand new, how you navigated that? Oh, I think you're muted.
I'm on mute.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, I think for me, I was in a probably peculiar situation, I'd say. And hopefully none of you are in this position when you start. But my first day, you know, I'm in the lobby for 30 minutes waiting. And then I find out, you know, an hour later that my boss was actually no longer with the company from the Friday prior. And so you can imagine as a new PM, right? Like in this role, or even as an intern, right? That's like you definitely don't want to start off on that note. But really, like the best advice I got was during that time was go meet with every single PM in the building, right? Go understand how our product works across the ecosystem. So that's exactly what I did. I put 30 minutes of time on the PMs that I would work with directly. I work on a platform team, which meant that I was working more horizontally across product verticals versus working on a specific product slice. And so with that, that meant that I was going to be working with different PMs. So that was my main goal. One, meet with as many PMs as I can to get to just, you know, understand how they got to ADP, what products they're working on, who they work with. Depending on if you're working end to end, you're likely going to have a designer, right, or a front end product. Go meet your design team. Go sit down with your engineering counterpart. That's going to be probably the most important relationship you have in a day-to-day environment, because that person works directly with the engineering team that you'll be partnering with, or teams. And then find out who are the stakeholders that you need to know right now, right? And then go put time on their calendar. They will be more than willing to meet with you. And in fact, they'll actually, most PMs actually don't do it. And I find most people in general just don't do it. So the more that, you know, you put yourself out there, the better reputation that you will start to build. And then be transparent, you know, you're new, you're not going to know everything. And you're not expected to know everything. So when you don't know something, ask the question, right? Even till this day, like I'm in meetings, even with senior leaders, even with people who have like 10 years of experience at the company or more, right? I'll ask a dumb question and I'll even just call it out, you know, like, hey, I have a dumb question. And I'll ask it. And what you'll find is most people are gonna not know the answer to that question either. You're gonna find sometimes where you do ask a legitimate dumb question, right? But it at least sets you on the right path. And then you'll know, okay, great. Then they'll shoot you some documentation and read, right? There's gonna be a lot of reading that you're gonna need to do as a new PM. Go into Confluence, go into the Jira, right? Go see what the team's been working on. Go see what was delivered in the last quarter. See what the roadmap looks like. Go sit with whoever is building that roadmap. Sometimes it's not always somebody you work with directly, you know, depending on the type of environment you're in, whether you're in a startup or an enterprise. So those are really the main points, you know. Go establish some relationships, ask the dumb questions, put yourself out there, and know the customer experience. That's the best thing you can do for yourself. You will set yourself up for success, and you won't find yourself 90 days or 14 or 30 feeling like, dang it, did I do enough? You know, because if you start to feel like that, granted, it's a normal feeling. Everyone feels that way, even till this day, right? Like as a senior level, you know, product leader, there are times where I feel like, man, I need to dive deeper, right? And you're not going to grasp things the first time, especially in a technical role, right? You're going to have questions where somebody's going to be talking about an API, and maybe you've never even heard of an API because you're new to it. That's okay. You know, but the second time you have the meeting, you'll grasp it a little bit more. The third time you have another meeting around it, you're going to know a little bit more. And then also do your due diligence, you know, go online, go read about APIs, go read about Jeff Bezos's mandate and Steve Yeagee's Google rant, right? Like those are super important. You want to really understand how technology is being built in the modern day. Platform is really that direction. You look at Google, Amazon, Shopify, and Shopify's killing it. And even ADP, right? That's all the direction that many companies are going in. So it's super important to have a baseline understanding of how APIs work so you can make strong product decisions in conjunction with a solid business decision.
Right, absolutely. Thank you, Miles. And Yanni, you know, based on our conversations before, it sounds like you're more in a marketing centric kind of role, maybe less technical in the product sense. How did your approach to understanding the product, understanding the customers and your stakeholders differ?
Oh, I'm sorry. I got myself muted by accident. I did not notice. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Sorry, I was just asking, are you talking about still in the first 14 days or just in general? Okay, so in the first 14 days. Okay, yeah. So again, I gotta go back to something that I mentioned in the previous question, which is the just overarching strategy for the product that you're working on. Or in other words, like what's the goal or the objective of your internship project? Because I think it's just like Miles said, the last thing that you want in an internship or like your first project as a PM is to start getting to a solution too quickly and then to find out that you're not answering the right question in the beginning. Like you think you're answering question A, but people are thinking about question B. You know what I mean? So so I think the first thing still in the first 14 days is to make sure that you understand what is the goal or the objective of this product. And of course, every product is to be a success in the market, but there could be particular differences. Like, is this a particular time-sensitive product launch? Is it a is it something that the business is shooting for super high quality to be a leader in the market? or is it like a companion app? For example, something I'm working on is a companion app for a hardware product. So all of those things, all of that background information contributes to what is the strategy and what is the goal for that product launch. And I think as a PM, you gotta build that understanding before you jump into solving the problem. So that's the first thing that I would say. And then the second thing, talking to stakeholders is definitely very, very important. And by understanding the goal, I think it helps you to come up with a list of the key stakeholders. And then within the first 14 days, definitely get to that list of who are those most important stakeholders and start scheduling times with them, understand what they expect out of this project, or their vision for the product. Try to get their insights to help you. And then probably the third thing, and actually this webinar is helping everyone do this, is I think, at least for internship, a good plan for the internship is everything. Because you have a set amount of time to finish a project and try to make an impact. So planning it out, getting organized about the milestones, the deliverables, the key stakeholders, and how you're going to present your results, even how you're going to hand it off. All of those things I think are very important. And I would have that plan ready in the first 14 days. I would also review that plan with my manager and key stakeholders as well to get their input.
Great, thank you.
So that point, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, no, the point about, knowing what the situation is, and that's critical. So Yanni, dead on with that one, I agree. So the first 14 days, you don't want to move too quickly in the wrong direction. And, it's really important to know what is happening. So, one thing, one anecdote I can bring is, my first, couple weeks at AT&T, we were working on cloud DVR, and there were teams that were remote and local. And there was a little bit of energy between the two teams. And, walking into it, it was easy to understand that, hey, we all need to work together to win in this situation. We're on a tight deadline, and we're a little, I came into a project that was already a little behind. And building that relationship and establishing teamwork that was one of the keys to succeeding for both teams involved. And for us, it was awesome. We had a common enemy. I think that was the best way way we identified how to come up with how to bring these teams together. So there was a competitor who had an advertisement, and the advertisement knocked our product, saying, our product was evil for not having a DVR. And bringing all the teams together and, showing that commercial to both teams and saying, hey guys, this is what the other guys are saying about us. And we're the teams that can make this happen. And that helped kickstart a relationship that was, I'm not going to say it was the greatest relationship of all time, but it was at least a better working relationship. And we got out there and they had to stop running those ads.
Nice, thank you for sharing, Ethan. So now what we're going to do to wrap up this first 14 days section is to share a poll with all of you through Zoom. We're kind of trying to summarize some of the takeaways that our panelists are sharing here, so that even if you're not taking diligent notes during this, you can still have something to refer to. It's also a way to kind of share what you think was the most important takeaway, or something that you're really going to put into action and put on your own personal 90-day plan. So look for that in just a moment. Oh, okay, so there are some technical difficulties, and now it's up. All right, so go ahead and vote on the poll in Zoom. And in just a moment, we will go ahead and share the results. All right, so we're getting a lot of responses, which is great. So we're gonna wait just a couple more seconds to share the results with everyone. Nice, so the results should be up on your screen now. Establishing relationships, getting to know the goal of the product are the two front runners. And we recognize that there isn't the ability to check more than one box. Obviously, all of these are going to be important, but it's still kind of interesting to see what the top of mind priorities are going to be. So let's move on to the first 30 days then. Now that you're a month in, there's still some overarching themes that are going to be the same. But if we look at, for instance, your participation in meetings, how that might evolve. Miles, I want to talk about a quote that you had shared with me earlier, and it relates to your discussion of note-taking before. This notion of removing your ego in terms of how you approach questions in meetings. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think, being in product makes it super easy to have an ego, right? For one, right? You start to really know and own your product. You really know it end to end. And even for myself, going into ADP, when I first started there, I had stakeholders who'd been with the company for 30 plus years. I even had one stakeholder who was there for 50 years, right? So like going into there as a product leader, there was definitely a lot of discussions, that were humbling. We start to ask questions like, why did we do that? Right? Because you're questioning like why the technology works that way, or why the customer experience is so bad, in some cases. And a lot of it, has historical context, right? Weren't there 50 years ago when product wasn't even a thing, and some, business analyst made a decision around saying, hey, I need something, right? And some engineer built it. And so a lot of times when you ask that question of why, it is very insulting, right? So learning how to communicate is super important. There's always a way to ask that question without saying why. How is a better question, or what was the historical context into like into the decision of that experience or that product decision, or how did we come to that outcome, right? Those are more like inviting questions that people will want to answer. If you ask why, you'll find yourself in some conversations where people are very defensive, right? And then also too, even when you're in your own product and Scrum team meetings, right? You're gonna find yourself in positions where you're starting to learn the product more, and you feel like maybe somebody's asking a question that they should know, or they're asking a question where, maybe they didn't read the agenda or they didn't read the pre-read. And you find yourself wanting to like snap, like come on, you should have read that, right? But really, like, it's an opportunity for you to show your leadership skills, right? It's a perfect opportunity, because if that person is asking a question, there's other people in that room that feel the same way too, right? And so it's an opportunity really for you to kind of give everyone a baseline understanding. And at the same time, people make mistakes, you have to give people the benefit of the doubt in this role. You're going to be working with people in sales, people in marketing, people within your product team, executives. Not everyone's going to be as close to the product and the customer as you are. Hopefully you should be much closer to the customer than some of the folks you work with, but part of it is really honing in on your leadership skills. Go read material around being a better leader. There's a book that I always recommend to product folks, and it's around influencing other folks on your team, right? It's Never Split the Difference, and it's by Chris Voss. Like that's my favorite book. Like I don't like rereading books, but that's a book that I'll go back to and try to get some bullet points from it again, because it really teaches you how to say things in a way that people will want to respond to you, right? And that's what you're looking for. You need to be able to influence, and the better you become at it, the easier your job will become.
Great, thank you, Miles. And thinking about working with all of these different cross-functional teams, you've already established some relationships with your stakeholders and identified those. But by the time it's the first month, Yanni, we talked a little bit about how your networking kind of shifted a little bit at that point in terms of not just stakeholders, but also other folks adding to your learning. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I always think that being new or being an intern is a perfect opportunity to explore other functions, explore other product teams, and just learn, soak in information and experiences from other people. So, and actually I think it's a perfect time, like at maybe about 14 to 30 days when you've finished building a plan for your project specifically, like take some time to think about what are the teams that you're interested in learning more about. And it doesn't even have to be that you want to work for that team in the future. Maybe you do, but even if you don't, it's just a great opportunity to understand them a little better. Like for example, in my internship, I talked to other PM teams. I talked to the marketing team. I talked to the sales team. Yeah, I forgot who else I talked to, but just be open about exploring, especially when someone is kind of offering the opportunity that let's set up a time and chat if you want to. I'm perfectly open to that. Like, don't give up that opportunity, jump on it. Don't be shy about doing that. And I just think it's people are really willing to share information when you're new to the company or when you're an intern. So I think by the 30-day mark, I kind of had some thoughts about who I'd like to talk to and start reaching out to them. It can take sometimes several weeks to get on somebody's calendar. So that's why I would do it like in around 30 days rather than later. Yeah, so I would really push everyone to go out of your comfort zone and learn about other functions, how they work, their perspective in terms of working with PMs, as well as how their teams contribute to the company as a whole. What's their daily life at work like? What do they deal with? How do they engage with the customer? All of that is very interesting, actually.
Great, thank you. And yeah, it's also just super informative because being a PM, you're at the center of all of these different functional teams. Being able to empathize with them a little bit better adds tremendous value.
Yeah, and as people early in your career, at least I don't know like where I'm gonna end up in 10 years or 20 years. Who knows? I might still be a PM. Maybe I'm in another different function. So I would say just be open and take that opportunity while you're an intern or a new PM.
Right. Thank you, Yanni. And so with the first 30 days, it's also kind of like a very clear milestone, right, of being a month in. Ethan, can you speak a little bit about what you're doing in terms of monitoring and checking in with your performance and your progress, both professional and personal?
Yeah, and so in those first 30 days, again, it's really key to just get the basic understanding. Hopefully, through the interview process, you have an idea of what you might be getting into. In those first 14 days, you're really kind of getting a strong understanding of your day-to-day duties and your workflow, and the right people you should be talking to. And then by the end of the first 30 days, you really should have a strong understanding of, what are what is the situation I'm in? What are the main challenges that are facing, my team and the company as a whole? And starting to think through, what are the things that I can provide, and what's the value that I can involve, and are there any pilot studies I can create that would help form new ideas of how to solve these bigger problems. In terms of tracking it, personally, I would put together a 90-day plan, probably similar to the one that we're sharing, and I would actually check in with my boss, and then in both of my roles, it was his boss. Well, not both my roles, but each role actually has to have happened to have been his boss. Just to have that skip level meeting so that you can understand what they're looking for as well. And article I read really recently was terrific in suggesting that you might even want to create a deck after that first 30 days. So you can talk about, hey, here are my learnings. You have kind of a documented presentation that you can refer back to at the end of those 30 days saying, hey, here's what I learned. And then at another checkpoint, you say, hey, here's where we were and here's where we are now. To Yanni's point, which is kind of funny, reminds me of another story. I had a great former colleague at another company I was at, and as I said I was leaving, he's like, and use that new guy routine as long as you can, new guy or new girl. He said, 6 months, a year, just bring it up in meetings. Like you say, hey, you guys are the experts here. You've been working on this longer than I have. I'm still new. Can you please, why would we do this? Or can you please explain to me this? And there's no real expiration on that. And, if you've been there 6 years, people might start to chuckle, but it's a good opening and a good opportunity for you to be in a place where you're saying, hey, I don't know what I'm talking about. Can you explain to me how we got here? And in terms of the influence we can provide by not having any authority, playing up the fact that you don't know and that's okay with you really pays dividends in the long term.
Great, thank you, Ethan. So we're running a little bit low on time. We're gonna transition to the poll again. This time, taking in the feedback from the audience, we have found a way to enable multiple options being checked at the same time. So this time we're going to share again kind of some of the takeaways for the first 30 days summarized for you. And if you think about, again, what are you actually going to put into action? What are you adding to your own personal plan? And how are you adapting it? The poll will be up shortly. Cool, and then we'll give a little bit of time for folks to fill this one out. All right, let's just wait a little bit, a couple more seconds. We're still getting great response, so thank you all for engaging with us. We were definitely thinking we wanted to make this as engaging of a format as possible to really get you to think about, how you're actually going to make this actionable, because it's really easy to talk in generalities and listen to all forms of webinars online, but really engaging with it on a personal level is really going to help turn this into something actual. All right, so the results are in. Ask how, not why, and use the new guy girl routine to gain information, as well as document your learnings are really high up there. Great, thank you all. So again, want to be mindful of time so that we actually have time for Q&A. For looking at the 90-day horizon, in my conversations with the panelists before, the themes that we've heard throughout really carry through still. There is one point that I'd like to talk about. And Ethan, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about the importance of mentorship. And that's something that really becomes really important as you look farther out beyond your 90-day plan as well. what is the importance of finding that mentor, and what's your approach to finding a mentor?
Yeah, I mean, mentorship is key both within and without the workplace. And, within the workplace, we talk about, the first 90 days, again, you're learning and you're building relationships, you're building trust. And you really, unless you're super lucky and, someone taps you, you're really not able to establish that mentor-mentee relationship until they know you and know that you're worth their time and effort. And so that's part of the criticality of those first 90 days is there's a disproportionate reputation that's built. And so it's super important to earn that trust early and then allow that to, help establish yourself to blossom and grow afterwards. So in those end of those first 90 days, it really would be key to, as one of your goals, think through, hey, who have I seen here that I think I would want as a mentor, and who do I think is just a good person all around, who seems to be savvy, who seems to understand the landscape, and who might be interested in seeing me grow. And so I think at the end of the 90 days, that's probably when it's appropriate. And outside the workplace, it's also equally important. I've been super lucky to have a mentor throughout my professional life, and he's able to I can bounce questions off. I'm not able to inside the workplace. He's more interested in my work-life balance and seeing me grow as a person beyond the company than any mentor I've seen within a company. But it really is important to have both of those. You couldn't have one without the other. It's really critical to your success within a company to have someone who's a champion for you, potentially outside of your own organization, so that you have an understanding of how you can grow and how to help your team grow.
Great, thank you, Ethan. And so we're running up on time, so I'm going to switch quickly to the Q&A now, and we'll take a couple of audience questions. Keep them coming. Working off the top of the list. For Yanni, I think this is a question for you. As a current product intern, I'm not sure if my internship even lasts the full 90 days. What are some best practices in regards to managing that condensed timeline while not detracting from the full PM learning experience?
Yeah, so I think this actually goes back to the plan that we're helping everyone build. So I would say customize it to the length of your internship, definitely. It doesn't have to be exactly 90 days. But the goal still remains the same, which is to build milestones in the beginning, understand the goal of the project really well, and then execute really well based on that plan that you created. And maybe I haven't emphasized on the point of executing well very much yet, but I think it's everything we talked about having a goal and building a plan is really important. But in the end, you gotta execute and you gotta stick to your plan. And if you find that you have deviated from the plan, if you're delayed, this or that, immediately think about, are you still going to be able to meet your deadline? And if not, then what is the alternative for you? Don't try to blindside that at all. So yeah, but try your best to stick to the plan, stick to the milestones. Yeah, and I think just customize it for yourself. What it is you need to have a plan that you believe in will make you successful at the time that you have built it. It's not for anybody else. So you got to believe in the plan that you have built, and to do that, there's of course like talking to stakeholders, all those things that we've said. You need to do that in order to have that confidence in the plan that you have built. But build a solid plan, for your project, for your timeline, and stick to it.
Great, thank you. That really drives home the message of this event, right? Like making a plan that you can actually stick to and act on.
I did not say that because David asked me to.
Thank you for plugging that.
Opinion.
Great, thank you. And Ethan, there's a question here really about building relationships with your stakeholders and influencing them in this remote environment while you're virtual, and even if you have remote teams outside of a pandemic. And I know you spoke recently to a colleague about how to kind of manage relationships virtually. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. And so let's speak specifically to starting a new role in a remote world, because this is a different conversation if you were able to establish something ahead of time and they knew you and you knew them. But if you're starting fresh and you're starting fresh in this environment, I tapped one of our PMA leaders, Kevin Sakamoto, who recently started a new position in this world. And he said, yeah, it is a little different. There's some major differences. Some are for the better. So one of the best things that he said was he was shipped a computer and it was fully stocked with everything ready to go. So you just need to log on and ready to rock. Some companies I've been at, it can go 2-3 weeks. You're going to the IQ bar to meet with IT, and so that there's some benefits, but there's some really tough pieces to it too. One thing is, you can't go to a meeting and all of a sudden someone's like, hey, there's a new face here. What do you think? And for a lot of companies, we're not doing video share. So sometimes it might just be your name on a long list. So there's some parts here where you have to go a little bit outside your comfort zone, and you may have to speak up in some meetings where you may not feel like you're super ready to. So make sure you pick your opportunities. You can ask stupid questions, but make sure you ask stupid questions at the right time. But you do want to be more vocal. You want to be known to be present, and it's harder in this world. Another piece to this is understanding the culture of a company, which could be super tough if you're not together. And his recommendation was to step up your Slack game. It's now more important than ever. Those water cooler conversations are gone. If you're new to the company, you're no longer just going to run into people in the hallway, introduce yourself. There's, it could be your team Slack channel, but then there's also often some, common interest Slack channels that are not as work related, and it's worth peeking your head in there and starting up conversations and getting involved. It is tougher to start in this world. It's not impossible, but you can get into the culture, you can find these conversations, but you just have to, there's a little more effort that's involved now.
Absolutely. I really like the tip of stepping up your Slack game. Sounds like an excuse to spam more emojis to me. No, they are, yeah. I mean, that's a way to kind of show personality and build relationships, not just strictly work focused. To kind of wrap things up, I think this is a pretty good final parting question, and this is for Miles. Miles, in our conversations, you are a super well-read guy, throwing quotes left and right that were just really landed on the topic at hand. We have one attendee asking if you have any recommended resources, websites, newsletters, other ways to improve on being a PM.
Yeah, solid question. I'm over here. I'm I think he's going to ask me. So I'm going to my email and checking these newsletters. But yeah, I have a few, and maybe we can plug them after as well in case anyone forgets. I have a few. So one is, if you're into fintech and you love learning about financial tech products that are doing well out there, or even just startups in general, FinTech Today is a good one. It's actually by a buddy of mine. His name is Ian Carr. There's another one called Strategy. It's such a super difficult newsletter to say, but it's really popular in the industry, and it's really around strategy. Really solid newsletter. There's something called the Everything Bundle. And a lot of these guys are product leaders or executives. And then there's two more, and then I'll touch on some books. So Howard Lindzen, he's in venture capital, and then anything that Andreessen Horowitz puts out, whether it's on a blog, on their blog, or even Ben Horowitz's books, which I'll mention too shortly. What I will say is that not everything I read is also tailored to tech. I think of many of times, right, where we see ourselves in echo chambers and we end up making like really poor product decisions because we're all doing the same thing, or we all end up with the same user experiences, right? Which isn't always a bad thing, but it can be. So like one that what I will mention, I mentioned Never Split the Difference, read that. Another one is How to Win Friends and Influence People. That book is a really old book, but I can tell you right now, it's probably the best book I've ever read on communication. It changed everything about my style of communication. If you can power through it, there's a lot of historical context around US history that teaches some of those communication lessons that are also there. Okay, I'm not gonna mention the product Bibles, but like Inspired and the Lean Startup, like everyone knows you gotta read that. Like it's just basic reading, right? And I'll mention one more. So something that, or two more. So The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. You want to become a better leader, read that book. It's an easy, quick read. I swear you'll read it like in 2 hours. And it's super thoughtful. And then the last one being Creativity Inc., which is the book about Pixar. And it's just super inspiring. So, you know, take yourself out of like tech all the time, you know, and try reading things that are different. I also love reading books about psychology because I love learning about why people do things the way they do. You know, you want to be able to read a room very well and you want to be very aware. Those are the kind of things you got to study. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm always open for a chat. So if anyone in the audience wants to talk shop, you know, reach out.
Awesome. Thanks, Miles. And, you know, it's in this pandemic world that we're living in where I actually feel like, you know, I have more time to maybe listen to podcasts and things as I'm going about my day at home. So it's a great opportunity.
I didn't even mention that. And you know what? I'll plug that in because I do that, right? So actually, me, Kevin Sakamoto, and Cassie Campbell, us three are actually working on a Product in LA podcast that we'll likely be putting out in the next couple months in partnership with PMA. So that's also something where you'll be able to hear from senior level and executive level product leaders in LA. So be on the lookout for that.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. All right. So we are at time. You know, definitely realizing that next time this happens, maybe schedule it for 2 hours or something, because there's a lot of content to cover. But thank you all. Thank you to the audience for attending. Thank you to our panelists, Yanni, Miles, Ethan, for speaking to us all. And thank you to the back end team, Betty and David Denton, really pulling together all the interactive components and collecting all of these resources mentioned. Yeah, thank you all for attending. And again, hopefully this is the first of many partnerships to come. Ethan, is there anything else you want to say?
No, I just wanted to thank you and thank AnderTech, and to Miles' point, yeah, please reach out to him or me. I'm always open to chat as well. Join our newsletter if you haven't already at pma.la/join us. I guess join-us, and I think we'll put a link into the chat. It's the best way to hear about our upcoming events. And like I said, I love talking to Bruins. So yeah, please feel free to reach out. And thank you, David. Thanks, Miles and Yanni and David Denton and Betty Lee. Great event, guys. Well done, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks all. Take care.